In this video, we're going to look at arguments, like it says right there. Um, okay, so logic is the study of good reasoning. Um, and reasoning is consists of chains of declarative sentences. And declarative sentences are sentences that make a claim about the world, right? How the world is. So Edmonton is the capital of Alberta. 2 + 2 = 4. The moon is made of green cheese. These are all declarative sentences. They all make a claim about how the world is. And what makes these declarative sentences is that they have a truth value, right? They can be true or false, right? So these first two are true. Last one is false. Um, Not all sentences have truth values, right? So questions, commands, requests, exclamations, right? Where is my cheese? Get me some cheese. Please pass the cheese. Yum. None of these have truth values, right? It doesn't make sense to say whether where is my cheese is true or false, right? The only thing there that makes um, well, it doesn't make sense there, right? Because this is not a declarative sentence, right? It's a different kind of sentence. It doesn't have a truth value. Um, so these are not found as part of reasoning in the way that we're understanding it. Now, an argument is basically a bit of reasoning, right? A chain of declarative sentences that's being represented in language. And the way that we represent it is we're taking an argument to be a set of reasons, which we call the premises, that are intended to provide support for a claim, which is the conclusion. Um, and each of these, of course, are going to be declarative sentences, right? Each of them have truth values. The standard use of an argument is to convince a person to accept the conclusion, right? So this is typically the way that you'll see arguments being used. Is the argument is being given um, in order to convince somebody to accept the conclusion on the basis of the reasons that are being given. Arguments are also found in explanations, though. So the reasons there may be there to explain why the conclusion is true. That's just not something we're going to get into right now. The use of arguments in for purposes of persuading or convincing people is simpler, and it's all we need to deal with for now. Um, One thing that makes an argument good is that it's a piece of good reasoning, right? So, what you want from a good argument is that if you believe the premises, you should also believe the conclusion, right? You want this to be true in a good argument. Another thing on top of this is that an argument can be convincing or unconvincing, right? You can have good arguments where if you believe the premises, you should also believe the conclusion, but the argument manages to be completely unconvincing nonetheless. You can have arguments that are convincing despite the fact that they're actually terrible, where the it looks like the premises provide good reasons for the conclusion, but they actually don't. We're just not concerned really with that in this course, right? This is more along the lines of Phil 125, right? Practical logic. You get into issues of what makes arguments convincing or unconvincing. Um, yeah, we're only looking at arguments being good reasoning, or yeah, good arguments in the sense of being good reasoning. That's all we're concerned with here. This is what's called standard form. To write an argument in standard form, you list the premises in a column, and then you have a solid line, and then the conclusion. And um, and then there's a bit of variation here. Some people will put a therefore sign and then the conclusion. This textbook leaves it out, and so we'll just leave that out as well. So you just have the solid line and then the conclusion. Um, so when you have an argument that is given in a passage, right, and you need to interpret that, figure out what the argument is. And here particularly, when you have an argument that's being given in a passage, and you need to symbolize it, right? You need to figure out what the argument is going to be in symbolic logic. One of the things you need to look at are indicator words or phrases. So conclusion indicators, these are words or phrases that mark what the arguer is trying to convince us of, right? They mark the conclusion. So these are words like therefore, thus, consequently, so, hence, as a result. And then you get longer phrases like it follows that, it may be conjectured that. Premise indicators mark reasons or premises. So since, for, because, on account of, in as much as, for the reason that, etc., etc. Look for these because these sorts of phrases will tell you a lot about the structure of the argument. One thing to watch out for, though, is that a lot of these words can be used in other ways. So, like, he's been talking for a long time, right? I haven't eaten since lunch, right? These aren't saying that a long time or lunch are premises, right? In these cases, those words are indicating times. You change a bicycle tire thus, right? The thus in that case is not a conclusion indicator. You just want to watch out for cases like this and make sure that those words are actually being used as argument indicators rather than, in some other sense. Sometimes arguments can lack indicator words as well. Take this for example. Justin Trudeau is the best prime minister ever. His policies are fine and he's so pretty. Now, if you have a case like this where you don't have indicator words, because you see here, right, there's nothing here telling you what the conclusion is or what the premises are. What you need to do is you need to think about what interpretation is going to make this into the strongest argument. What you're applying here is referred to as the principle of charity. Right. The idea is that the most charitable interpretation, the interpretation that makes the argument strongest, is the one that is most likely to be true. Um, so you take this possible reconstruction, for example, Justin Trudeau's policies are fine. Trudeau is the best prime minister ever. Therefore, Trudeau is pretty. Uh, this is this is not what the speaker intended. It's almost certainly not what the speaker intended because it's an absolutely terrible argument, right? These are not reasons for thinking that somebody is pretty. So this you can rule this out as being what the speaker actually meant. Um, Another possibility is this: Justin Trudeau is the best prime minister ever. Trudeau is pretty, therefore his policies are fine. This is better, but I mean, not by much, right? I mean, think about somebody trying to use this to convince somebody of the conclusion that Justin Trudeau's policies are fine. And the premise that they're giving is that Trudeau is the best prime minister ever and Trudeau is pretty. I mean, this is not going to convince anybody at all. Um, so that's also not a very plausible reconstruction of the argument. Um, so then we're left with this, right? Justin Trudeau's policies are fine. Justin Trudeau is pretty. Therefore, Justin Trudeau is the best prime minister ever. This is the strongest possible interpretation that you can give. At the very least, here you're moving from particular characteristics of Trudeau to a general assessment of him, and that's um, you know the sort of move that you would expect to find in an argument of this type. Note that this is still a really terrible argument, right? I mean, you know, the particularly right whether he's pretty or not is not really plausibly relevant to whether he's the best prime minister ever or not. The strongest possible interpretation of an argument does not necessarily mean that it's going to be good. Um, sometimes like this, right? The strongest possible argument interpretation that you can give is actually still going to be a terrible argument, but it's still the one that you want to, that you're going to want to come up with because it allows you to identify what the conclusion of the argument is. Okay, so that's a basic rundown of what arguments are and how you would go through in a text and identify what the premises and conclusion of an argument are for when you need to symbolize it.